Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Alabi.
I'm Tundra Abiola.
I'm Veronica Odeka. Welcome back.
It's been years since a woman held any meaningful leadership position in the two chambers of Nigeria's National Assembly. In fact, one has to go back to 2007 when Patricia Ette held sway as the Speaker of the House of Representatives for just 4 months. Even at that, it was not a smooth ride for her, admittedly because of self-inflicted wounds sustained as a result of alleged financial misappropriation, for which she was eventually removed from office. But while Nigerian women continue to play a bit-part role in governance, those of them in the rural areas and urban poor are continually at the receiving end of Nigeria's worsening social, political, and economic realities. To throw more light on this, we're now being joined by Mary Ikoku, a Nigerian development consultant, women's rights, and education activist. Welcome to the program, Mary.
Thanks for having me here.
So, Mary, I want to start out with one of the most glaring data points that people have been talking about over the last couple of months. I've been in a couple of women forums where this has really been the huge topic, and that is that Nigerian elected officers have gone from 6% representation to 4% representation. At 6% representation, we were already underrepresented in comparison to some of the other countries. We've seen what countries across the continent are doing when it comes to reserving seats for elected offices. How does Nigeria hold, how do Nigerians hold, how do we hold our head up knowing that we're not even gaining when other countries are at 50%, 40%, 30% women representation in elected chambers, elected offices, and we've now gone from 6 to 4? What is this? This is an indictment. What do we say to people when people ask us? What do we say to our children when they ask us, what did we do?
Well, I think the figures you've just reeled out is quite abysmally low. And I think it's also important that we recognize that Nigeria as a nation is one of the countries in the world that is committed to addressing the issues that are militating against women, equality rights, and Nigeria is one of the countries among the Committee of Nations that is committed to addressing these issues of ensuring equal opportunities for women, advancement politically, economically, legally, and even in every ramification. But sadly, it is so sad really to mention that Nigeria hasn't quite measured up to that. Statistics are out there to show that Nigeria hasn't done quite well when it comes to ensuring women active participation in leadership. And that is one area among that even before the Committee of Nations, we don't look very good. We don't look great as a country because when we continue to exclude a group of people that make up a huge quota of this country, like half of the population, and if I may add, women make up more than 50% of Nigeria's population, and women also gave birth to 100% of the population. So that tells you that even the president is giving birth to by a woman. The governors, all the men in this country, men and women, are giving birth to by this group of people. So why on earth would we exclude the people with the most talents, the people who decide even that we come into this world, you know? So taking that into cognizance is where people need to understand that when we clamor for more women in leadership, more women having access to finance, to economic growth, that what we are doing, why we are doing this is out of love for country, because we want to see some of these things happen because we need to develop this nation.
Mary, thank you for that. I just want to continue with this conversation and go over a few figures that I've said, because you did say Nigerian women make over 50% of the population. In fact, it's 51% of women, and they are involved in the voting process when it comes to what happens in this country. Yes, we understand that it's male-dominated when it comes to politics, The numbers are showing that no woman has ever held the office of the president. Neither have they ever held the office of vice president. Neither have they ever held the office of governor. In fact, we've had 6 women in the 36 states as deputy governors. Less than 10 have held positions as senators. Less than 7%, while men constitute of 90%. What do you attribute these factors to being? Do you feel that it's a situation of women not necessarily wanting to be involved, or do you feel that it's a situation of them not giving us enough seat at the table? Because you did allude to the fact of financing might be a situation. It could be probably that most women, are domesticated. I did also read recently of a story of one woman, in fact, from the North, who went up against for an electoral position and wasn't elected into office because they felt that as a woman, her place is not to be heard, but it was more to be seen. What do you say to a situation like this, and how can we actually move forward and change this conversation?
It is very important that the country commits to ensuring more women get in. And I'll tell you that some of the reasons behind this, there are multifaceted issues leading to the crisis and the gender gap and women non-participation, ranging from violence, lack of financing, even there are certain institutional barriers that also stop women from this inclusion. And when there are institutional barriers, you can look at issues where you have a 35% affirmative action on the gender policy, which was established in 2007. And up till now, that gender policy hasn't really been constitutionalized, because you want to legislate on it and make sure that it finds its way into our constitution so that it makes it easier even for the regulatory bodies, for the INEC and other people, political parties, to take that as a handbook, as an authority to be able to implement inclusivity of women. Because when there's that gap, and you understand that, like you rightly said, that this is a male-dominated area, and if it's a male-dominated area, it means there's a problem. It means that men are already saturated in that area. So what you need to do is to find ways, a very carefully crafted ways to ensure we make inroads of women. And how you can do that is making sure that there are an intentional quota system that prepares a place for women participation. And when you do that, because when you say 35% affirmative action, what that does for you is that the APC, the PDP, and all the political parties would understand that even when they are deciding leadership of their party, that they will have to have given account of 35% representation, where you begin to see women vying for position of party chairman, party legal advisor, party secretary. I don't know who told them not to aspire for these roles. So it's a systemic thing, you see. And there's only one position that women are just easily given to, which is this women leader position. I mean, if you look truly, if you look honestly, through the political parties, and especially in the rural communities, you will find out the quality of women who they put in this position of women leader are also not women who understands mobilization in a very hardcore manner, where you will be able to do a proper segmentation to say, these are the quality of people you want, this is the mass mobilization you need. You also need women who understand numbers, who understand how to use data to win elections. So even the quality of women we put is just number. It is not qualitative representation. And when you do not have people who will represent us in this country, having competencies, having quality, having value system, what it also boils down to some kind of form of exclusion. Because what typically happens is that they will put the wrong kind of women in those positions, and then when you speak up tomorrow and say, you are not giving us opportunity. And they tell you, hey, we gave you this slot. What did you do with the position we gave to you? But they realize that they have actually excluded you by giving the wrong people without competence in those positions. So while we clamor for more women in leadership, we're actually asking that you actually look at beyond numbers and make sure that the number of quotas you are putting are women and men with the right kind of skills, with the right kind of competencies, and the right kind of value system, because we need to salvage what is left of this country. President Goodluck Jonathan did adopt, in fact, he did more than 35% in appointing position during his time. He did about 40% appointment in his cabinet. And we are asking this president, he has an opportunity right now in this new administration, which is thankfully headed by him. He has another opportunity. We thank him for the token he has given in the last administration, where we have 1 or 2, 3 women in leadership position. This time around, he actually has a golden opportunity to right the wrong and bring in more women in his cabinet, as ministers, as directors, as head of, chairman of boards, board of directors, board of government. He has the opportunity to do that. Also, the governors of the various states also have this golden opportunity to right the wrong. I had one state has just appointed the first female
If I may come in here,
SSG.
Ms. Ikoku, if I may come in here. It would be great if the president would do this by executive order. It would have been wonderful if he had mentioned gender parity in his speech. He did not. But I want you to go back to that point you made about representation. You made it in a different context, but let's look at our representatives in the National Assembly. The 8th National Assembly rejected a proposal for the constitutional amendment that would have entrenched that 35% affirmative action at federal level and 20% at state level. What do we, the public, need to do? Because we cannot continue to look to our leaders. We, the public, need to learn how to lobby our representatives, our lawmakers, and tell them this is what we expect of you in the National Assembly, so that we do not have the 9th National Assembly rejecting a proposal that would have improved this country in leaps and bounds. The 8th National Assembly failed abysmally in this regard. How do we ensure that the 9th National Assembly does not?
The 9th National Assembly, actually, they had an opportunity to also include women, but just like the last assembly, even the last assembly had a female majority leader at some point, I think.
Senator Olujine.
But the National Assembly, right now we have even lowered the bar, where we are having just 6 women in, 7 women in the Senate, and only 11 in the Federal House of Representatives. With that kind of numbers, what exactly can 11 do out of 360 people, and what can 7 do out of 109? And look at these figures. You have a population of almost 200 million people, and you are having in a chamber that has 360 and 109, and you are having only 11 plus 7. Is that not 18? 18 people representing over 100 million women of this country. Is that a funny kind of statistics that we should be throwing out? If these women bring out any bill, they would do tougher lobbying than their male counterparts, because they don't have the number in terms of lobbying. And politics is all about negotiations. And yes, I agree with you, the level of series of lobbying that has to go on. Calling for gender policy is part of this lobbying. Is one of the things. Like last week, we had 2 weeks back during the inauguration, before the inauguration, we did have this meeting with the office of the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and there were a lot of incredible ideas that came out from that meeting. You know. And it's all forms of lobbying, and a lot of us have been meeting with political party leadership. And we'll be meeting with parties to ensure that you also have female delegates. Because where you don't have enough female delegates, who is going to elect you to even scale through the primaries level to even be able to become a candidate to run for office? So it is a deep down level of exclusivity that, yes, we may need to bring in that some kind of executive fiat, if you like, or the president may have to make a pronouncement and have an executive order. Maybe it will help. But I know that the national gender policy is actually a very right place to start from. Because if you do that, it becomes necessary that even INEC cannot address issues with political parties if those parties haven't met the required 35% affirmative action at that level, you know? So lobbying, yes, is going on, is ongoing, but how much lobbying can you do where the numbers keep ticking up and it is still always more men? I can tell you that out of maybe you had 1,900 leadership position at the federal level, across the states, and you don't have up to 100 women, imagine, in all of that figure. So what that tells you is that you actually have, at that House, National Assembly today, you have less than 3.6% representation. It's a trickle, it's a token. I really don't know how much we can do. But if we really love this country, it must take a collaborative effort of all of us, men and women, and we need men as allies to make sure this happens.
Thank you so much, Mary. One of the things I had the experience of this week was being on a panel where we talked about the cost of exclusion. One of the things that Nigeria has committed to is obviously trying to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda. In the president's speech, he talked about lifting 100 million people out of poverty. Goal number 1 is on ending poverty. And also goal number 5 is achieving gender equality. Also, one part of it is really about to promote full and productive employment and decent work for all. One of the themes that we continually see is the lack of inclusion of women at the political level, but actually as in the economy. And if women are not included economically, we also aren't going to be able to meet our gender goals. When you hear the president say he wants to lift 100 million people out of poverty, how do you think that we're going to achieve this if women are not fully participants in the economic growth of this country? We're leaving so much money on the table because women are not part of the economy. The IMF said we're leaving 1.25% GDP growth on the table because of lack of women gender participation in the economy. What advice do you have for the president? Let's look at it that way.
Mr. President need to. I think all I can say, like I said before, Nigeria is among the Committee of Nations that have committed to addressing the issues of women inequality in the areas of economy, legal system, and even politics. And the president already, you know, the National Investment Program is one great one the president has done, but we need more. It's done quite a bit, but there's a lot more to be done. And he has consistently said he really wants to address the poor of the poorest in this country, which is good. But we also need to have a clear-cut strategy and plan, tactical action plan, apart from the national, the investment program headed by Miriam Uwais. There have to be tactical action plan that we must see that also have developmental index embedded in them. Because sometimes what we see here for me, as somebody who has worked around development organizations, I think that sometimes we look at issues from the perspective of even countries. We're looking at countries that are working from a point where they are already developed. Now, as a developing nation, we also need to understand that there are certain intrinsic details that forms part of the actions that we take or projects that we deploy or implement in the country. There are certain intrinsic developmental needs that must come with them. So when we are talking about, like, for the issue of economic growth and inclusion of the women, getting them economically empowered, you need to look at what are the number of women who make the largest population of this group. How educated are these people? These are things development looks at. Now, the uneducated, you have to look at schemes that will address such people. So they're not looking at jobs creation for such people who have no little skills, no education.
Sorry, Mary, I don't want to interrupt you, but one of the things you're talking about is education and literacy, and Nigeria has one of the lowest female literacy rates. Yep. So I mean, I know you're talking about an action plan.
That's right.
I just want you to sort of start to, I mean, if we can start to formulate what is it that needs to be done by the president, by private sector, by public sector, and by the everyday citizen, like Tundu said, what do we need to do? How do we specifically ask for what we want at the table?
We need to educate the girl child in Nigeria. We need to education. We can never overemphasize this. When you are not educated, the chances that you will really compete favorably with your educated peers are very low. And then when we talk about education, both the formal and informal education, they are key. People need to acquire skills. People need to acquire the requisite skills and talents that we need to ensure to take us out of poverty. So no matter what the government wants to do, you also need to have a citizenry that are active enough to uptake whatever the government is providing. So the other option is gender violence. When we continue to have women that have been consistently suppressed by certain traditional attitudes, that doesn't even allow them to breathe, that doesn't even allow them to think, that doesn't even allow them to aspire for the greater things of humanity. You cannot do so much for this group of people. So let us start from even the homes and make laws. I'm happy that Lagos State has really taken care of that, and a lot of work needs to be done. We need other states to adopt the issues of the VAP bill that is going to violence against persons, that other states in the country, about 7 states or so have adopted that. Benue State just did recently. Other states need to adopt, do the same thing and ensure that this Violence Act stops in this country. Because when you do that, you also will take women out of poverty. A woman that is suppressed, even as a young child, molested, abused, suppressed, doesn't really aim so much. I can't sit down here and be talking with you if I fall into that category. And I'm speaking up for the love of this country and for the women and girls and even boys who fall in this category. The country needs to know that it is unconscionable to continue to keep a certain group of our population in this in that dark place. So it must take a concerted effort. And Mr. President would have to understand, and I believe that, I have no doubt, especially after the meeting we had with the First Lady some time back, I believe that the president has a heart to do something about these issues. But it's now for them and his administration going forward to seize this new opportunity. He's got a new lease of administration, and he has to utilize it appropriately to make sure that what they have, he flies off to go to to join other members of the international organizations and the international community to agree and sign up these charters, and then come back home and nothing happens. He needs to understand that when they agree and shake hands and sign those bills, that when they come back to Nigeria, it needs to be implemented. And implementation of all of these things, I believe, would trump and make sure that women breathe again in this country. Those who are breathing are speaking up. But we need more women to be on the table. Because when we are not on the table, the chances are that we are on the menu. So well, Mary, I think it's something that has to be really looked at.
And now I want to just talk to you about the mortality rate amongst women. It's really poor in Africa as a whole, but of course in Nigeria. While you mentioned previously before that our president definitely has a part to play in making sure that women are included, I want to ask you how much of it should be cultural, because in certain parts of the country, there's a lot of stigmatism as far as poverty and women having access to health care, and the numbers are really, really low. How much of our culture, how much of a cultural influence affects the decision for women and our mortality rates to be so low?
A huge percentage we really would go to certain cultural and traditional attitudes that even preceded a whole lot of us. You know, the culture has a big role to play. But I pretty much don't like dwelling on this culture, because I believe that culture is for the people and not the people for the culture. So if you have a mundane culture that stifles the growth of a nation, you do away with such culture. So there are punitive culture that deserve punitive measures to eradicate, you know. So for instance, you have certain culture that clearly just puts a woman out of the scene. So a culture that increasingly tells the woman that she doesn't have to be heard. You just be seen, be there, be a decoration, be like, I marry you, you stay in my house, and that's what you are. Those things shouldn't show up if we are urging to be a civilized nation, a developed country. Because when we stifle the growth of women and girls, we are stifling the growth of our nation. So we have all those culture, and this is even at the root of domestic violence. Is at the root of it. The root cause is culture, because culturally we already see men as domineering, men as stronger. Men have been put to have certain kind of roles that they play, while women have their primary or biological roles that they play. But a culture that also does not recognize that both men and women do have brain cells that work in the same way, or that the women do have brain senses and hands and legs and can be given the same opportunity that the male child has. It's a culture that is quite retrogressive and must be done away with. That would be my point when it comes to the issue of culture. I think over time we look at infant mortality rates. You understand that even that culture is what makes people. Yes. You see a woman doesn't have rights to her body and her reproductive health. Do you understand?
Yes.
Where you are having to force the woman to carry on a pregnancy to full term, even if her life is at risk. Those are things we should do away with, because a woman needs to stay alive to birth lives, and no woman should die bringing life into this world. And I tell you, on the average, women die every other day in this country trying to bring life to our nation.
Yes.
It shouldn't be so. It shouldn't continue. The infant mortality rate and the maternal death rate in this country is often even among the largest in the world.
It's the highest in the world.
It's the highest.
Nigeria is number one now.
60% during labor.
Yeah, it's the highest.
It's the highest. Yes.
But I wanted to talk to you about how we've jumped into this conversation about women's involvement or lack of involvement. But I wanted to talk about exactly why it is important and really stress that, because we might be assuming that people know. They might not know why it's important. Because you've talked now about maternity rates and how cultures at home in society affects even things like the lives of women and children. We need to stress it. A lot has been made of the petrol industry bill, for example. Petroleum industry bill. That would never have occurred to you as a development specialist and women's rights activist. It would not have occurred to any of us sitting at this table. It's only an oil and gas person that would sit and think about proposing those reforms. So this is the importance of having the interested parties having to decide what goes on in the spheres of interest that affect them. It's crucially important. So I wanted to talk about that, the practical benefits that we will see if we have more women at the highest levels of decision-making, other than, as you said, just being decorative.
Yeah, like I said before, our demand really is for more women representation in government. It is really born out of love, if I must say. It is born out of love. Love for nation that want to see, see a rise. We want to see our country rise when men and women side by side are thinking together and working together for the good of the society. Because where a man is on that table, he doesn't get pregnant, he doesn't really know about gestation, full-term pregnancy, preterm, he doesn't understand all of that. It will take a woman on that table to think of policies that will affect her. You cannot be talking about me, what involves me, without me being there. Do you understand? So there are a lot of benefits. I mean, the benefits of having more women inclusion is so much, is so good, is for the growth of Nigeria, is for the development of Nigeria. Where you have more women included in the scheme of things, you will also have women who are thinking about the family. Women are more responsive. We think about our spouses, we think about our sons, we think about our daughters, we think about everybody. In fact, the women, like the mothers, hardly think about themselves. It is country first. It is the people first. Everyone else but you. And when you need people with such heart and desire in leadership, and you will see a turnaround, positive turnaround. For the transformation of this country, you need women inclusion. When a woman is on the job, things get done. When they work side by side with the men, greater things get done, greater things get achieved. But you have to educate the women, you have to educate the girl child. Because an educated woman is an educated country, is an educated community, is an educated village. Just raise one girl child, and you will see the multiple effect. The ripple effect is something we can never overemphasize. A woman gets economically strong. She doesn't think about herself. She plows back that money into raising children. She makes sure her daughters, her sons are well catered for. That is a woman for you. And when they are empowered, they do more. They run governance. It's a great transformational ability that we have been denying this country of. And we can't be seen to be talking about democracy. If democracy, what I understand by democracy, if we say that democracy brings gains and prosperity to a country, then it means that Nigeria has failed at it. Has failed at it because Nigerian women haven't really enjoyed the fruit of the democracy because they haven't been given the opportunity to give their talents, to give their expertise, and all these potentials that most times end up in the grave because of unutilization. So it is for the good of country. It is not for any self-serving needs of any woman. That all the women you see clamoring for women inclusivity in their own rights are holding their fort. They're doing so well in their personal areas of endeavor. So we are clamoring for the good of this country. We need Nigeria to develop, and we can never say this enough.
Thank you, Mary. I want us to take a sort of a macro look at what's happening around the continent. When you look at what's happening in Ethiopia, you look at what's happening in Rwanda, you look at what's happening in South Africa. Do you believe that these models and the success that these countries are making, because now there's no excuse, this is happening on the continent, do you think that our lawmakers and our leaders will take this into account? Do you think this is the beginning of sort of a new wave on the continent, and hopefully Nigeria will jump on that train?
I believe that, I mean, I've heard Mr. President say that he will get in more women in this administration, the second time. And I've heard that not once, I've heard that not twice. So I believe that there will be a change. About the legislators, I don't know what to think about them and that area. I think for the legislative arm, it may be just necessary that if we achieve the 35% affirmative action, that we need to have more women in parliament to change things. Because the way that house is constituted right now, that when I think of even a tweet that's, described Honorable Linda Ikbazo only as a pretty female PDP member. You know, narratives like that also reminds you that we have a long way to go when it comes to gender parity in this country. Because whoever handled that APC tweet may not even know any better. It's probably a young man who is, you know, coming from a deep place of patriarchy. So he sees a woman like Linda Ikbazo and a ranking member of the House of Representatives, and all he could describe her as is a pretty female from PDP, from Anambra. You see, these are the kind of conversations we don't want to see in our politics. We don't want to see them. So this National Assembly would have a lot to do. They have all the women there. They should ensure that they make sure these women get leadership roles, like chairman of committees. I think it will help. There's also the minority leaders, majority leaders. They still have opportunity to right this wrong, because we can't continue like this, you know. No,
they've actually chosen their minority and majority leaders, unfortunately.
We shouldn't look at only the presidency. There are board chairmen, there are board directors, government boards. The universities, we can have vice chancellors that are female. There are very brilliant, intelligent, smart women all over this country. Why are we not utilizing their potentials? Why are we not utilizing their expertise? I'm just asking. And there's a More Women campaign, and we happen to be part of that coalition of women groups that are asking for more women inclusion. You know, and all of us in this group are seeing women like Obi Ezekwesili, Dr. Abiola, and all of us. Everybody in that group, tone of Women FM radio. So everybody in that group, we're working assiduously, and we will be highly disappointed if after all of these efforts, nothing gets done. It will be really sad and unfortunate. And I don't see it not happening. I believe that there will be a lot more women. I'm almost ready to tell you that President Muhammad Buhari may just surprise all of you and surpass President Goodluck Jonathan's 40%. But we hope on hope and see that the right thing is done.
Well, we'll keep looking out for that. Yeah, I think that's the key.
I think that overall, with what you've said, it's really empowering, and it makes sense. I think that the conversation needs to continue, and you start with conversations like this and having guests such as yourself on the show to kind of propel this forward. Really, thank you for being a part of the show, and thank you for your time.
I think legislation, that's really it at the end of the day. No matter, if you don't have legislation, we can continue to talk to a blue in the face. People will not feel the need to do
And I do have to commend Kaduna State, because as the appointments are trickling in, we're getting an idea of each state governor's cabinet.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we have no idea of the federal cabinet, but, you know, eventually that will come. Kaduna State has done very well. Governor El Rufai has done very well with the female appointees there.
So and then also, too, we were talking about a head of service in Niger State, the first woman. So, and the governor of Lagos said he is going to be playing catch-up, but he is also ready to step up to the plate.
Lagos has a female SSG.
So we need more.
Let's keep on watching. It's time now for a short break. When we return, we'll have the Executive Director, Order Paper Nigeria, Oke Epaya, who will be taking a look at the National Assembly elections and legislative outlook in Nigeria. Stay with us.